in how we access information. Except when you send something online, you're not actually sending an original unique thing. You're sending a copy, and you're retaining an original. Now, for most kinds of information, that's okay. In fact, it's one of the big benefits of the internet. So if I send an email to one person, I can send it to many. If I host a website, anybody can access it. If I put an entry into Wikipedia, it's available for all to see. So it's kind of like we all have our own printing press for information, and that's an amazingly powerful tool that's had a very democratizing effect on the world. Except when it comes to things that have value, assets, like say money, being able to send a copy is actually not a good idea. So if I owe you, sir, 20 dirham for something and I send it to you, it's important that you know that when you have it, I don't still have a copy. And I can't send the same amount of money to everybody in this room. Because if I can copy money the way I can copy information, the money becomes worthless. So it's good to have a printing press for information. It's not so good if we all have a printing press for assets. And this is a very specific problem that computer scientists have been trying to resolve for decades. It's called the double spend problem. How do you ensure that when you move something of value digitally, that you don't leave behind a copy? And because it's such a difficult problem to solve, we still had to rely basically on intermediaries, middlemen, to sit in the center of transactions and perform a variety of very important steps. Everything from establishing identity to creating trust between parties. And overall, these intermediaries, banks, governments, brokerages, but also big technology companies, digital conglomerates, social media firms like Facebook, they do a pretty good job, except they have some very specific limitations. The first is that they're centralized, and anything that's centralized is vulnerable to hacking or to attack. The second thing is that they add cost and slow things down. In the case of, say, sending money overseas, it can take days and cost 10% or more to move value between two parties. The third issue is that they exclude big parts of the population. There are 2 billion people in the world who are completely unbanked, and the same 2 billion people, roughly speaking, don't have an identity. They don't have a way to prove who they are. And the fourth issue, and I think arguably the most prescient given what's happening in the world today, is that they capture information about us. And that's problematic because it means we can't use that information to organize our lives. We can't monetize it. It's worth something. The market capitalization of Facebook and Google's primary asset is user data. There's over $1 trillion combined. And if it ends up in the wrong hands, it can undermine our privacy. So you can argue that even though the internet has created a lot of value, a lot of that value has been captured asymmetrically by intermediaries, both the old and the new. So what if the internet were entering a second era? From an internet of information to an internet of value, based on this technology called the blockchain. And what the blockchain is, in essence, is a vast global distributed ledger, basically a record of all transactions, except instead of sitting inside one system, like inside of a government or in a bank, it sits on every single computer that's connected to the world. It's like everybody has a watch, and it's all synchronized to the same time. And so when everybody checks, they can all trust that the time is accurate, just as when they look at the blockchain, they can know that the information is true. So on this kind of a system, not just information like emails and PDFs and websites, but anything of value, money, stocks and bonds, titles and deeds, property, intellectual property, even votes in an election, can be moved, stored, and managed peer-to-peer, securely and privately. And where trust is not established by an intermediary, but through a combination of mass collaboration, consensus, cryptography, and clever code. So in 2008, a person or persons by the name of Satoshi Nakamoto created this thing called Bitcoin. And what Bitcoin was designed to do basically was to be cash for the internet, a way to move value peer-to-peer without a third party. In the same way that if you were to go out and buy a coffee and hand the cashier cash, you're not showing your driver's license, you're not using PayPal, you're not using a Visa network, there's no payment system. Cash is a bearer instrument, okay? When you give it to someone, they have it and you don't. That kind of a system did not exist in the digital world. And what was amazing about Bitcoin as a version of digital cash is that it worked. And it worked so well that it has set off the spark that's caught on like wildfire and captured the imagination of people in every industry. Because trust is not established by a third party, but rather through the network and through consensus we call blockchain, the trust protocol. So this is a profound innovation, a generational shift in how we think about organizing capability. And leaders of old paradigms sometimes have a hard time embracing it. So Jamie Dimon in December of last year said that Bitcoin was a fraud. And actually, even these days, you continue to see people coming out with the same thing. And we've seen resistance in the past to new ideas, space travel, the internet, the telephone, the automobile, and usually leaders of old paradigms are often wrong. And Mr. Diamond actually this year said, I regret calling Bitcoin fraud, and please just stop asking me about Bitcoin. And you may have noticed also, by the way, that yesterday Goldman Sachs just announced that they'd be creating a Bitcoin trading desk to use and trade this asset class. So you're starting to see lots of incumbent adoption. So there are lots of use cases for this technology in basically every industry, but financial services is the one that I think is most relevant today. So the industry is complex, but really the financial services industry does basically two things. It gives us, as people, as businesses, as institutions, a way to move value, store value, a way to prove identity, a way to access credit, a way to exchange financial assets, a way to connect investors with opportunities, a way to account for what's happening in an organization, and a way to insure against risk, both for the institution as well as the individual. And every single one of these different functions of this industry are going to be transformed by a new technology called tokenization, basically. So you look at the world today and you hear about these 1,000 or so cryptocurrencies, and I'm sure you ask yourself, why do you need 1,000 currencies? Surely one currency is enough. If you had to use a different currency every time you went to a different store, it wouldn't actually have that much utility. And that's a very good point. And I think it's important to look at this not as one single asset class, as cryptocurrencies, but as an asset class with 7 categories. Cryptocurrencies, platform tokens, utility tokens, security tokens, natural asset tokens, crypto collectibles, and crypto fiat stablecoins. So let's go through them very quickly. Cryptocurrencies, Bitcoin. So Bitcoin today is one of the largest global payment networks in the world. It stores hundreds of billions of dollars. It manages billions of dollars a day in transaction volume. Over 60 million Bitcoin wallets that have been opened. Bitcoin has become many things, but it's not the only cryptocurrency that's out there. There are other ones like Monero, Zcash, Dash, and Bitcoin Cash, which is a fork of Bitcoin, basically a different team split off to run a different version of the blockchain. And these different cryptocurrencies have different use cases. So things like Zcash, for example, prioritize anonymity. And there's lots of really valuable use cases where you may not want the other counterparty in the transaction to know who you are. So is it a risk or opportunity for banks? Well, it depends on who you ask. JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon, by the way, who said that Bitcoin was a fraud, said in their annual risk report in February that cryptocurrencies pose a risk to a number of functions of their organization, as does Bank of America. Goldman Sachs, on the other hand, has made a significant investment in a company called Circle, which just acquired a major cryptocurrency exchange called Poloniex, and as I said just yesterday, announced a Bitcoin trading desk. So it really depends on how you look at it. If you look at this as a risk, then it's going to become a risk. If you look at it as an opportunity, then you can find ways to do things that were previously impossible. The second category are these things called platform tokens. So just a quick show of hands, who's heard of Ethereum? Just about everyone, yeah, figures. So Ethereum is many things, and people think of Ethereum in the context of Bitcoin. They say, well, is Ethereum a competitor to Bitcoin? How do these two relate to each other? And they're not. They actually do different things. Whereas Bitcoin was designed to be cash for the internet, Ethereum is a platform to run what's called distributed applications and smart contracts. Basically, a smart contract is like a regular contract, but it's written in code and it self-executes. So you don't need brokers and agents and clearinghouses.